Today, we're unpacking the foundational mindset that separates the people who build lasting, generational wealth from those who are just stuck endlessly chasing a paycheck. We're going to decode the blueprint of one of modern history's greatest wealth builders, Jeff Bezos. But look, this isn't just some history lesson about Amazon. Understanding the underlying psychology and frameworks that Bezos used, that can fundamentally shift how you approach your money, your career, and your future. So let's get right into it. So let me ask you a really direct question. When you study self-made billionaires like Jeff Bezos, what actually sets them apart? Like, what is the real gap between folks who spend their entire lives on a treadmill running after the next paycheck and those who construct these lasting empires? It's a huge question, one that financial analysts have debated for decades. But to figure out how that level of wealth is constructed, we actually need to look at what the answer isn't first. Because people always jump to the usual suspects, right? They think it's extreme genius, or pure luck, or just being born with the right high society connections. And sure, having a great network doesn't hurt, but we need to cross those off the board entirely. I mean, when Bezos started Amazon, he wasn't relying on some guaranteed safety net. He actually warned his early investors, including his own parents, by the way, that there was a 70% chance they will lose every single penny they put into his company. So it wasn't luck, and it definitely wasn't a sure thing. The real differentiator is something way deeper. Extraordinary wealth comes from a highly specific way of viewing the world. It's literally a way of seeing the future that most people just completely ignore. True visionaries aren't just reacting to today's economy or today's interest rates or whatever is trending on social media. They're actively projecting and building for a reality that hasn't even arrived yet. They operate on a completely different timeline than the rest of us. To really grasp this, let me show you exactly what that looked like back in the 1990s, when the internet was barely a thing. Okay, so back in the mid-90s, the world today meant physical retail stores. It meant high certainty. People literally thought Bezos had lost his mind. Wall Street critics were constantly asking why anyone would ever buy a book on a clunky dial-up computer screen when you had a massive mega bookstore right down the street. But Bezos wasn't looking at the present. He was looking at unproven potential. He saw that web usage was quietly growing at 2,300% a year. He wasn't building a company for 1995. He was laying the infrastructure for 2005. And that ability to focus on what the world could become, that's the true seed of wealth. And that means ignoring current opinions and current fears is an absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite for massive financial growth. Most people make their decisions based entirely on today's problems and today's news cycle. But to break out of that endless loop, you really have to adopt a new personal philosophy. Wealth comes to those who can think beyond the present. You have to ask yourself, what trend is quietly changing the world right now while everyone else is completely distracted? Because by the time an idea is universally accepted and comfortable, the biggest wealth-building opportunities have already passed you by. So why is thinking long-term so incredibly hard for the average person? Well, frankly, human biology is working against us. We are hardwired for short-term dopamine hits. We crave immediate profits, instant validation from our peers, and overnight success. And because our modern society essentially demands absolute proof before progress has had the time to actually compound, people abandon their goals way too early. They panic and sell investments at the first dip, they quit their businesses after a couple of tough months, all because they demand immediate results in a game that literally requires time. Take a moment and let this sink in. Some of the absolute best opportunities in life look laughably small and insignificant in the beginning. At first, absolutely nobody claps for your small portfolio. Nobody believes in your tiny side hustle. When Amazon launched AWS, their cloud computing branch, critics thought it was just this tiny, irrelevant distraction from selling books. Fast forward to today, and it powers a massive chunk of the entire internet, generating tens of billions of dollars in pure profit. Every single industry-dominating oak tree starts out as an uncelebrated, easily ignored acorn. Because wealth is constructed in the shadows over a really long timeline. Look at this. Year 1, it's almost always just a small, messy idea full of friction. Year 3, it's quiet progress. You're working weekends, making sacrifices, and absolutely nobody is noticing. Year 5 is usually the hardest because it's all about staying consistent when the work feels incredibly boring and the initial hype has totally faded. And then finally, year 10 hits. Suddenly, the media and your friends are calling you an overnight success, completely missing the brutal decade of invisible progress that snowballed to get you there. Which brings us to a concept that most people honestly hate, but visionaries completely weaponize: patience. And I don't mean just sitting around doing nothing, waiting for good things to happen. Patience is a rare, active behavior that creates uncommon advantages. In a society totally obsessed with risky day trades, viral trends, and getting rich by next Tuesday, patience becomes your ultimate competitive advantage. While everyone else is scrambling for speed and burning out on hype, the person executing a boring, long-term strategy almost always takes the whole pie. It's really not about waiting for one lucky break or hoping the perfect opportunity magically drops into your lap. Big results are simply the compounding magic of small, smart decisions repeated for a very long time. It's making the right choice with your monthly budget. It's improving your product or your own skills by just 1% this week, and then doing it again and again, year after year. Those micro decisions, they don't feel like wealth creation in the moment, but stacked over a decade, they are the actual engine of extraordinary success. Okay, so if the blueprint is mathematically this simple, think long term, be aggressively patient, repeat small good decisions, we've got to ask ourselves a rather painful question. What actually stops the average person from executing it? Why do so many people have fantastic ideas and huge dreams, but they never even take step one to make them a reality? It really comes down to this ultimate emotional barrier, something Jeff Bezos famously called his regret minimization framework. People care way too much about temporary embarrassment. They completely paralyze themselves asking, what if I fail? What if my friends laugh? What if this whole thing flops? But visionaries, they weigh that temporary fear against the heavy, permanent sting of regret. Because looking foolish for a year because you tried a new business venture is vastly cheaper than getting to age 80, looking back at your life and feeling that soul-crushing regret that you never even tried. The harsh reality is that growth rarely feels comfortable. Building wealth requires strict sacrifice. Investing requires risking your hard-earned capital. Starting a business means walking into the total unknown and facing your own flaws head-on. But that discomfort isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It is simply the required price of admission for a better future. You have to be willing to be highly uncomfortable today in order to be wealthy tomorrow. Comfort and wealth, they rarely share the same space in the beginning. All right, now let's pivot to the ultimate operational rule Bezos used to scale Amazon to $1 trillion valuation. Value first, money follows. If you want to get rich, you ironically cannot obsess over the money first. You have to obsess entirely over the customer. You have to constantly ask, how can I serve them better? How can I remove friction from their lives? Amazon did this by pioneering things like free shipping and one-click buying. When you create massive usefulness and prioritize solving other people's problems, the wealth naturally follows you as an unavoidable byproduct. And listen, this isn't just abstract theory reserved for Silicon Valley billionaires. This exact value paradigm dictates who wins and who loses in the real world across every single industry. It doesn't matter if you're trying to climb the corporate ladder, scale a weekend side hustle, lead a new team, or build an audience online. Real, lasting success doesn't follow noise, and it certainly doesn't follow cheap shortcuts. It follows the person who becomes undeniably useful to the people around them. Bring the value, and the market will reward you. So, to synthesize everything we've covered in this explainer, your definitive blueprint to stop merely chasing money and start genuinely building wealth comes down to 3 distinct phases. Step 1, think long term. Tune out the daily noise and focus on where the world is actually going. Step 2, create real value. Become completely obsessed with solving problems and being useful. And step 3, trust compounding. Stay incredibly consistent, repeat your smart decisions, and just let time do the heavy lifting for you. Look, you might not have billions of dollars in venture capital funding today. You might not have the perfect educational background or incredibly powerful connections, but you do have your focus, your resilience, and your time. Your wealth isn't going to be created in a single flash of lightning. It's going to be built in thousands of small, quiet choices you make every single day. So the only question left for you as we wrap up this explainer is this: what small decision are you going to make today that your future self will thank you for?